Everybody's working for the weekend. Everybody needs a second chance. Everybody's going out the deep end.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, guys, and happy 4th of July sort of weekend. I know the 4th is Tuesday, but some of you might be celebrating today. I am not because it is pouring off and on here. So no cookout today. Maybe tomorrow, hopefully. But welcome to Sabby's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter, and Rumble. What's up, guys? Welcome back. So we have a lot to discuss today. I usually give shout outs to people in the chat. I'm actually going to go ahead and try to jump right in because I want to make sure I cover everything, and I have a lot to say. I want to go ahead and give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. It really does go a long way. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies. It's always a lot of the Sabbies. Members, and of course, we have our newbies. Let's give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron, Dina. Let's give her a big whoop whoop. You can see everyone's name listed here, and you can also see their name scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail. Oh boy, I can't wait to get into these stories today. I have so much to say. Tonight, we are discussing Glenn Greenwald blames the media. What is Glenn Greenwald upset about, and why is he blaming the media? I 100% agree with him in reference to this, but I think he has some things to say that I think you really need to hear. We're also going to discuss France is on fire. Macron very upset in that picture, but where is President Emmanuel Macron during a time when people need him so much? We're also going to discuss Joe Biden's student debt lie. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you have heard what has happened in reference to the SCOTUS canceling Joe Biden's student debt forgiveness there. But Joe Biden has issued a response. We're going to get into that. I'm going to tell you why this is not correct information, and then we're going to go on from there. And I'm also going to discuss the new cost of living report. This is the one for 2023 that was just released. And we discussed the one for 2022 last year. So today I am going to need a little bit of audience participation when we get to the cost of living report, because I am going to need you to tell me which states to look up. So get ready for that. But for now, let's go ahead and get into our first story. I don't know if you have been paying attention to what is happening in France right now. It's crazy. France is literally on fire. Now, you saw some of this behavior a little bit during the protest against the pension reform that Macron implemented, but now things are a lot worse, and it's over a different situation. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about this on social media, and they're leaving out a very key fact in reference to the fires that are happening in France. And that is this gentleman here. You see, this little boy, 17 years old, Nahal, he was enrolled at a college in Syrinus, not far from where he lived, to be trained to be an electrician. Nahal was actually killed by French police officers during a traffic stop. This is another reason why I say police officers should not do traffic stops. They overreact and things get out of control. But this 17-year-old boy is actually not French. He is North African. He is one of the migrants that came over to France. And so if you can imagine other North Africans and other Africans that have migrated to France are very angry. And this is not a one-time incident. I'm going to explain a little bit of that later on as well. But first and foremost, I want to show you how these events begin to transpire. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, in France, people are rallying for a third day over the fatal police shooting of a teenager. You are seeing his mother right there leading a tribute march. A short while ago, the boy, identified by authorities only as Nahal M, is reported to be of North African descent. The shooting happened during a traffic stop on Tuesday in Nanterre, a working-class town on the outskirts of Paris. French officials say the officer who shot and killed the 17-year-old acted, quote, illegally. We're now learning that the officer has been put under formal investigation for voluntary homicide.
Let's pause there for just a second. So, as you just heard, the police were in the wrong. Let's go on.
Well, protesters have set fire to several cars in Nanterre. French President Emmanuel Macron calling the shooting unjustifiable while also condemning the unrest. Our Paris correspondent Melissa Bell has more.
Cars, town halls, schools set on fire across France as rage over the police shooting of 17-year-old Naël continued into a second night. Enough to force the French president to call an emergency ministerial meeting.
The last hours have been marked by violent scenes against police stations, but also schools and town halls, and basically against institutions and the Republic. It's absolutely unjustifiable.
So that was President Macron telling you that the behavior of the police is unjustifiable. So even President Macron is letting you know that the police were in the wrong. So just keep that in mind. Let's continue.
The deployment of some 2,000 police officers on Wednesday to the Paris suburbs did little to quell the anger, with 150 people detained. It's not the Republic that was in custody. It was not the Republic that killed this young man, pleaded the government spokesman Olivier Véran this morning. Another appeal in vain to calm the violence, as Véran described some of the attacks on government institutions as organized, almost coordinated. In response, a massive deployment of police forces on Thursday, some 40,000 across France, including 5,000 in Paris. But even before nightfall, a protest led by Naël's mother turned violent. Emotions still raw, even as the police officer accused of shooting the teen was placed under formal investigation for voluntary homicide.
Even though the police officer was placed under formal investigation, that doesn't mean the police officer will be held accountable. I mean, we've seen this happen multiple times in the United States, where they will start an investigation, even sometimes go as far as to indict these police officers, but usually they are not held accountable. And I believe this is why people rose up the way that they did in France. Now, this is not to say that that type of behavior is acceptable or is encouraged. But what I think is really interesting is that there are actually people right now on Twitter who are more upset about property than they are about the life of this little boy. And we saw this again also with George Floyd. Like people were like, oh God, no, they're destroying the Target, as if Target doesn't have insurance and they can't rebuild another one. Even Target said that they would be fine. People more upset about property than someone's life that was taken away from them. You can rebuild these businesses, but you can never bring back that little boy's life.
Scuffles breaking out along the margins of the march, some 6,000 strong, according to local media. Anger on the streets of France remains all too palpable, with a family grieving and a community looking for answers as Paris suburbs and much of the country prepare for another difficult night.
And the night did become more difficult. In fact, the next couple of days will become more difficult as well. You'll see here in this clip I want to show, it says Paris suburb unrest, police arrest 150 in the night of intolerable violence. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
We begin in France. Across the country, clashes have erupted between the police and protesters after police official fatally shot a teenager. Well, this is the second consecutive night of chaos now. Well, violence was witnessed in the working-class Paris suburb of Nanterre. Protesters threw fireworks at police and set cars on fire. Clashes were also witnessed in the northern city of Lille and Toulouse in the southwestern region. Police said the situation in cities like Dijon also remained tense. French authorities deployed thousands of personnel amid fears that violence could escalate further. At least 150 people are now.
Let's pause here. Why does this look familiar? It was just a month or two ago when I was covering the protest in France over the pension reform. Similar scene in reference to the cars being set on fire. There were other things that happened too, like they stormed the BlackRock headquarters because they were responsible for the pension reform. But what I have noticed is that some of the same people, not everyone, but some of the same people who were cheering on the protesters during the pension reform issue for doing this same behavior are now condemning the migrants for doing this behavior. To me, you can't, it's one way or the other. You know, if you were okay with French people doing that, but you have a problem with the migrants doing the same behavior, what is this really about? The number of accounts that I saw on Twitter telling everybody this is why you should not let migrants in. You know how many people are saying that right now? How many people are telling you this is why you shouldn't let them in your country? And totally leaving out what led to this. A lot of them not even mentioning that this little boy was killed.
Arrested across the French Republic. The killing of the teenager has also caught the attention of French President Emmanuel Macron. Well, Macron has described the second night of violence as unjustifiable. This morning, he held a crisis meeting with ministers where he denounced the attacks on state institutions.
After protesters and riot police clashed in a Paris suburb, French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday described as inexcusable the shooting of a teenager by French police during a traffic stop.
So again, Macron says that the shooting, that it was inexcusable.
It was a rare criticism of law enforcement by the president, hours after the incident triggered unrest on Tuesday night. Prosecutors did not identify the victim, but according to a neighbor and acquaintance of the family, he came from an Algerian family and his first name was Nael.
This was before he was identified.
31 people were arrested and dozens of cars were burned, mostly in Nanterre, Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said. Prosecutors say the 17-year-old failed to comply with an order to stop his car. The officer fired and he subsequently died from his wounds. A video shared on social media.
We're going to pause here. This is the vehicle. He's in the vehicle. These are the police officers.
Verified by Reuters, shows two police officers beside a car. One shoots as the driver pulls away. A homicide.
let's pause here for just a second, as I've talked about police cases multiple times. This is another example where the person that they are trying to pursue is either running away or driving away from the police. And remember what we have told you multiple times before, especially from people who are abolitionists. If they are running away from the police, they are no longer a threat. If they are coming towards them, obviously that's a different story. They're going to have to try to defend themselves. But if they're running away from you, they are no longer to be considered a threat.
Side investigation has been opened. The two officers, aged between 38 and 40, were experienced, according to Darmanin. Paris Police Chief Laurent Nunez told BFM TV that the justice system would need to decide whether or not their actions were appropriate. Residents of the Paris suburb say they're saddened by the event.
It's tragic. We're still talking about human life. So I don't know. I'm saddened for the family.
I think there were faults on both sides, and the state has a responsibility. They should be managing this, since it's starting to get out of hand. But I think that starting a revolt like what happened yesterday will not change things.
There have been 2 fatal shootings during traffic stops in France so far in 2023.
Only 2 in France compared to the United States. But I told you before, I don't think police officers should do traffic stops.
2022, a record 13 people were killed in such circumstances, compared to 3 in 2021 and 2 in 2020, according to a Reuters tally. It showed the majority of victims were black or of Arab origin.
And there you go. And similar to the United States. This is the piece people aren't leaving out. You know, a lot of times people look at a country like France and they're like, well, France, they have everybody in France, right? Like there are black people that have been born and raised in France and they're, you know, black French people, that kind of thing. France was also one of the countries that a lot of American artists moved to during the 20s and the 30s because they allowed them to come in. So there was people like Josephine Baker who moved to France to pursue her career there overseas because she was able to get more work. But that doesn't mean that they still do not have systemic racial issues, even in a country like France.
For more, our correspondent Ross Cullen is joining us live now from Paris. So we know that French President Emmanuel Macron, he called an emergency cabinet meeting this morning in the wake of these violent clashes that erupted across the country overnight. Bring us up to date.
Before we get into his response, for those of you asking where was Macron during these events, apparently, according to video, I can't play it on here because of copyright, but according to video, he was at an Elton John concert. Apparently, he was hanging out with Elton John, took pictures with Elton John and everything while his city was burning. This isn't the first time. We saw this happen during the pension reform protests. He was traveling to China. He was traveling to other countries. He was trying to entertain King Charles while his city was burning. And it's really interesting considering the fact that it was just a couple of days ago that Macron made the statement that in order for us to have a global agenda, that the US government and the Chinese government need to learn to collaborate with each other. So he has all these suggestions and advice for how other countries should operate, but he can't manage things in his own country.
Yeah, well, this is the front page of a newspaper, Libération. If you can see it there, it says police à la dérive, so police force on the slide. And what it shows is 2 police officers. They're the ones in the white helmets looking into this yellow car here. And this man here is holding a weapon pointed inside the car. This is the social media video which has been circulating online and is actually on the front page of many newspapers this morning here in France, showing that still from that video, which is 2 police officers alongside a stationary vehicle. Then there's a gunshot heard during the video. Then the car careers off and crashes into a wall, and the teenage driver Nael M was shot dead. That has led to 2 consecutive nights of violence. We saw riots again last night in many more cities across town than the previous night, which was Tuesday into Wednesday. on Wednesday night into Thursday in Bordeaux, in Toulouse, in Lille, in Lyon, many cities across France. The city halls were targeted and burnt, schools were targeted, police stations, trams, whole trams set on fire. So not just cars, actual long public transport vehicles torched by demonstrators and fireworks set off. Many police officers were injured. There were stones thrown and 150 people were arrested. As you say, President Emmanuel Macron has described the latest violence as unjustifiable and the killing of the teenager as unforgivable.
Okay. So for those of you wondering, well, what was his statement on that, what the police officers did, and in reference to the violence that's happening now? But things got a little weird because it wasn't just the images that I just showed you. At some point during one of the evenings, they freed animals from the zoo. I kid you not. Look at this.
Wish.
The zebra. Just
Oh, je fais un safari, voilà. Wish.
That was one of the things, one of them that happened, but there's more. Wait for it. There's more. Let me make sure I go to the right one here, and then I'll go to what Narwhal said. This one, someone drove into a shopping center. So this is from Wall Street Silver. Just in, France is falling into utter chaos. Someone just drove into a shopping center and everyone is looting the store. I kid you not. All of these things were happening. Look at this. I mean, when I say shit has hit the fan, shit has hit the fan. Has hit the fan. Now, let me go ahead and bring up, I want to make sure I got the right link here. For some reason, this is on here twice. I don't know why that's on here twice. Let me go to this here. Nope. Yeah, I'm going to go to this one. Now, again, as I said, a lot of people are upset because it's the migrant community. Due to the death of a refugee by mistake by the French police, the entire France was burned by refugees. In future, every country will have to think before giving shelter to the Muslim refugee. You see what's happening? You see what's happening now? So now it's like, here we go again. This particular group of the Muslim community, they are now being smeared as this way. Now, was everybody out there? No. But do you see what's happening? People need to think twice before giving them shelter. But where was this same disdain when the pension reform protests were happening and people were setting cars on fire and people were storming into stores and looting as well? Where was that same energy? Even one of the accounts that I showed you during the pension reform protest, Bernie's tweets, she was heavily in favor of the pension reform, of the protests that were happening. Her tweets are saying something different this time around, and she's blaming migrant people. You see what I mean? So it seemed to be okay when they were doing it, but it's not okay when the migrants did it. Now, there's something I think you need to know, and this comes from Mario. I don't know if you guys know Mario, but he's the one that hosts these really large Twitter spaces on Twitter. He's pretty close to Elon and things like that. He said, you've probably seen all the videos of the buildings and cars on fire, the explosions and reported shootings in Europe's third largest economy. Some have even compared the footage to a war zone. While this is very dramatic to say the least, it still shows the extent of the unrest in the country. But why? Why? An officer shot and killed a 17-year-old North African boy at a traffic stop. A prosecutor has determined the need for an investigation for voluntary homicide. It was the third killing this year during a police traffic stop after a record 13 deaths last year. Most of the victims have been Black or Arab. A study by an independent French human rights watchdog found that Blacks and Arabs in France were 20 times more likely to be stopped by the police. Amnesty International has been critical of French police ethnic profiling and discrimination records. My. Sounds familiar. He goes on to say, what happens next? Protests kicked off 3 days ago and continue to get worse. 40,000 law enforcement personnel were deployed in response to the unrest, with hundreds of arrests and counting. Fears are mounting of a repeat of the 2005 riots, also sparked by the death of African boys during a police chase, which saw mayhem in the country and thousands arrested. While most of France agree, violent protests are never okay. Some are using this as an opportunity to attack migrants and religious minorities, blaming them for the violence and claiming these riots are a result of lenient immigration laws. My thoughts. First, this hits close to home. I've spent a lot of time in France and speak the language fluently. France is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, but they have their flaws, and we're seeing one of them unravel yet again. We all agree the boy should not have been shot by the officer. We also agree that violent protests are not the answer. But the problem goes deeper than this. Studies have shown systemic racism within the French police, despite denial by President Macron and France's foreign ministry. So if there is systemic issues, aren't police one way to force needed change? Protests one way to force needed change? Yes and no. Protests serve an important piece of our democracy, one that should be cherished. They pressure authorities and government officials to act. Unfortunately, though, there will always be bad actors in any protest. And these bad actors sometimes turn a peaceful protest into a riot. When that happens, when a protest is dominated by rioters, a line is crossed. Do you agree with my take? When does a protest cross the line? And here's just an example here.
Wesh, ils ont réussi à rentrer. Oh les bâtards.
This is crazy. Move forward a little bit here. This one right here. This is the video that's making a lot of noise. This is crazy.
Je guettais le action de Sevran. Au nom de Dieu, le action de Sevran, elle a brûlé. Là, c'est super chaud. Là, c'est chaud, ouais. Au nom de Dieu. Ah non, c'est délicat à Sevran.
But long story short, the people have had enough. People have had enough. You know, oftentimes we've talked about a revolution, so to speak. Now, I will go on and say here, I honestly believe that if a revolution is to happen, it will not happen in the US first. There's a couple of reasons for that. I don't think a lot of American people are up for it. You see how quickly people will go out and protest and turn around the next day and go home. Also, our police are more militarized when you compare them to police in other countries. But if there were to be a revolution to happen, I honestly believe that France might be first. Because this isn't the first time. This isn't the first time the people in France have rose up against the government and said, this is too much. This is too much. Remember the French Revolution. It will happen elsewhere first before it even comes to the United States. So that's something to think about. Now, the police were deployed to try to contain the riots. This is from Al Jazeera. Listen to this.
Riots in France for the fourth night running. From Marseille in the south to Lyon, Grenoble, and the capital Paris, public property, cars, and businesses looted, torched, and destroyed. The nationwide anger on the streets follows the killing of 17-year-old Nael during a police traffic stop on Tuesday. The president of France is calling for calm and says the situation has been hijacked to spread anarchy.
This is an unacceptable exploitation of the death of a teenager which we deplore. This time should all be about contemplation and respect. I strongly condemn those who are using this situation to try and create disorder and target our institutions.
But why is your country, 2023 has not been a good year for France. The people have been out in the streets since, January? Actually, I think it started in December. Since January, the people have been out in the streets, whether it was the pension reform or other labor issues, they've been out in the streets. It has not been a good year for France. And this is something we need to question under Macron's leadership, because he's flying to all these other countries and trying to tell them what they need to do to make this global agenda happen. But how can you do that when you can't even control what's happening in your own country? Let's go on.
That sentiment echoed by France's football team, Captain Kylian Mbappe tweeting a statement from the players appealing for calm, saying they all understand the anger, but dialogue needs to be the focus, not violence. Following hundreds of arrests already this week, hundreds more were detained overnight. The mayor of Marseille says looting and violence is unacceptable and urged the government in Paris to send police reinforcements. A private funeral for Nael is due to be held on Saturday, as France remains a nation in turmoil.
So the funeral for him happened yesterday, and there were more actions and events after that. So, the people are just, I don't know how to explain it, but the people are just they're tired. And they've had enough. We can go ahead and move to the second part of the type V and C, so I can go to the next story. But the people have just had enough. And this is what happens when the people have had enough. The people will rise up. Now, one thing I have noticed, I haven't heard that other people were harmed. I've heard that property was harmed. And to that, I just say, I think that little boy's life is more important than property, is more important than a business. That's my take on that. But everyone should be looking at Macron's leadership at this point in time. Why are the people in his country so unhappy? Shout out to RND955 for becoming a new member. Whoop, whoop. Thank you. Thank you. And welcome. Okay. We are going into our second story, and I'm pretty sure all of you have heard about this, whether you have student loans or not. But yes, the Supreme Court, as predicted, struck down Joe Biden's forgiveness plan here for student loans. We're going to get into that story first, and then we're going to take a little step back in time, because I just want to remind you that Joe Biden did not go about doing this the right way. Whether you believe in canceling student loan debt or not, this is still on Joe Biden because he did not follow instructions. And we'll get to that point as well. Let's dive into this clip here from MSNBC giving us the deeds.
Ready. Julia, take it away. What can you tell us? So in the first case, those borrowers who challenged the Biden administration, the court said they don't have standing. But now we are getting the second piece of this, where the court has said the Biden administration plan to forgive federal student loans does not hold up. They're blocking that. They're agreeing with the lower court that that was not within their congressional authority. Again, this is the case brought by the state, saying that the people who were servicing the loans from within the states would be harmed by the student loan forgiveness plan. And so, yes, the borrowers did not have standing here, but the court is saying that the states do. I'm still getting more details to get the split. But again, for now, that looks like the Biden administration student loan plan is on hold. I need to read in and
let me just chime in here, because this piece that she mentioned about the people who give out the loans, no people, these are businesses. They're student loan companies. I have student loans. I know. Okay. Let's stop calling them people. It's a business. It's businesses like Sallie Mae that give out these student loans. Is it true that they would be harmed, that they would suffer? I don't think so. Have they been harmed? Have they suffered all this time that these student loan payments have been on pause and they haven't been receiving payments? Let me tell you something. There's two things I want to bring to your attention. One, student loan companies are connected to the federal government. Let me explain to you how. When I worked at one of my former universities, can't get too detailed here, there was actually a presenter from Sallie Mae. They were trying to work with students on a particular project. Do you know what they said while I was sitting in the classroom? They said that, don't worry about us going away because we have representatives on the Hill to make sure that businesses like us stay in place. They said that to a classroom of students. These people, the student loan companies, are connected to the universities and they're connected to the federal government. This is all a business. This is why I keep telling you, colleges they're not schools anymore. They're just a business. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. That's how this works. So this whole idea that it's like this just individual people who are giving out these loans, no, they're businesses. And you have congressmen and congresswomen who make sure that they stay in place.
Figure out if it's just the way they went about that plan or if there's really nothing they can do and they simply don't have the authority. And I'll get back to you as soon as we get more details.
Okay, come back to us. Thank you, Julia Ainsley. Again, this is a plan that impacts tens of millions of Americans. It was estimated to cost somewhere in the realm of $400 billion. That price tag could have played a pivotal role in how the justices viewed the Biden administration's authority here.
Okay. Now, so that was the announcement that went out. Some people were shocked by it. I was not. I told you that that was going to happen. And so, of course, Joe Biden did have to issue a response. Now, I'm going to poke some holes in this response that he provides because Joe Biden is lying here. And people need to know that. If you are a borrower of student loans, you need to know that he is lying in this statement. Let's go forward.
Let me begin by saying I know there are millions of Americans in this country who feel disappointed and discouraged or even a little bit angry about the court's decision today on student debt. And I must admit I do too. Before I tell you the steps we're going to take, I want to talk about what we've been able to achieve so far on student loan over the past few years. First, we made the largest increase in Pell Grants in over a decade, helping students from families who nearly all make less than $60,000 a year. Then we fixed the so-called, with the help of the department, public service loan forgiveness program. So the borrowers who got into public service, such as school teachers, police officers, social workers, service members, they actually got the debt relief they are entitled to under the law.
The first lie. Okay. When he talks about that public service loan forgiveness, guys, it is very specific. Okay. He mentioned teachers. It doesn't apply to all teachers. This is something that, like, one of my friends found this out. Like, they thought that they would be eligible for this and come to find out they weren't eligible for it because of the district that they taught in. A lot of times, if you're not teaching in a as need area or district, you don't qualify for that public service loan forgiveness. It is very much misunderstood. And I've noticed this with borrowers who just assume if they go do this job or that job, they're going to have their student loans forgiven. No, you have to fill out an application and they have to approve it to say, oh, yes, this job that you have is good to go. And then, by the way, you have to maintain that job. So if you get laid off or you get fired, that's a no-go. And then you have to do it. If I remember correctly, you have to continue that profession for at least 10 years in order for them to pay it off. If I remember correctly, because a friend of mine and I, we got really heated about this discussion. So there's so much that goes into this that he does not tell you. It's not all teachers. I want to make that very clear. Let's go on.
Before I came to office, only 7,000 people have benefited from that program. Today, over 600,000 borrowers have received relief from that program. And it's still available. So many more people can be helped. And I encourage you to apply if you haven't already. You're still eligible. Go to studentaid.gov. It matters. Third, my administration improved the program from the Obama-Biden administration on income-driven repayment plan. That's what it was referred to as. Back then, we set a limit. Student borrowers would pay no more than 10% of their disposable income to pay back their debt in any one time. My administration is going to reduce that to 5%. It's now the most generous repayment program ever. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether from a community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of disposable income to repay their loan. And that's income after you pay for the necessities like housing, food, and the like. Typical borrower is going to save about $1,000 a year. And if you keep up payments for 20 years without missing them, your total debt is forgiven after 20 years. That's what the program was before, but we've just reduced it to 5%. In addition to that, last year I announced my student debt relief plan, a plan that was on the verge of providing more than 40 million Americans with real debt relief, up to $10,000 for many borrowers and up to $20,000 for those who had gotten a Pell Grant. Nearly 90% of the relief would have gone to borrowers, 90% of it, making less than $75,000 a year. And no one making over $125,000 would qualify. This program was all set to begin. The website had been set up, the applications had been simplified so that it took less than 5 minutes to complete. Notice had been sent out to people about the relief they were eligible for.
The application was not simplified. I'm sorry. The application, it was a mess when people first tried to get on there. And second of all, and I said this before, it should have never been means tested. This is what happens when you mean test it. And then it's like, okay, you got to fill out this application. And then people on the other end have to do the paperwork and fiddle with it. You got to wait for that and all this loophole. It gives the Supreme Court, it gave the federal judge more time to strike it down. But I believe this was on purpose. Not for 1 second did I believe that Joe Biden didn't do this in a way intentionally for it to fail. First was the way that he went about doing it. He was supposed to do it through the Higher Education Act of 1965. That's what he was instructed to do by Elizabeth Warren, Ayanna Pressley, and Chuck Schumer. Those instructions were given to him in 2021. He decided to do it through the HEROES Act, which applied to the pandemic emergency. So since we were no longer in a state of emergency, they can easily just overturn it. So he didn't follow instructions. Of course, he's not going to tell you that.
16 million people had already been approved. The money was literally about to go out the door. And then Republican elected officials and special interests stepped in. They said, no. Literally snatching from the hands of millions of Americans thousands of dollars in student debt relief that was about to change their lives.
He said the money was about to go out the door. What money was about to go out the door? Do you guys see, what is he talking about? What money was about to go out the door? If you're canceling it, if you're canceling debt, what money was going out the door?
You know, these Republican officials just couldn't bear the thought of providing relief for working class, middle class Americans. Republican state officials sued my administration, attempting to block relief, including millions of their own constituents.
He honestly couldn't bear it either, because the reason why, for those who are not aware, the reason why students cannot file for bankruptcy for student loan debt is because of Joe Biden. He's the one who put that little provision in. It's the one debt you can't escape, period. So just keep that in mind. So I'm supposed to believe the person who implemented that provision really wanted to give people a fair chance here. He leaves out the fact that he also made that promise to cancel student loan debt for students that went to HBCUs who made under $125,000 a year, $120,000 a year. What happened to that? That never happened, by the way. He leaves that out. So I'm here to remind you.
Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the plan. I think every one. I don't think I had any Republican votes for this plan. At the same time, think about this. We all supported the Paycheck Protection Program. Remember PPP? You know, which was designed to help business owners who lost money because of the pandemic. It was a worthy program. But let's be clear. Some of the same elected Republicans, members of Congress who strongly opposed giving relief to students, got hundreds of thousands of dollars themselves in relief, members of Congress, because of the businesses they were able to keep open. Several members of Congress got over $1 million. All those loans were forgiven. You know how much that program cost? $760 billion. My program's too expensive. $360 billion more than I proposed in my student debt relief program. I was trying to provide students with $10,000 to $20,000 in relief. By comparison, the average amount forgiven in the PPP, the pandemic loan program, average amount forgiven was $70,000. Now a kid making $60,000, trying to pay back his bills, asking for $10,000 in relief. Come on, the hypocrisy is stunning. You can't help a family making 75 grand a year, but you can help a millionaire and you have your debt forgiven. My plan.
It's almost like he doesn't even understand what he's saying.
Would not only have been life-changing for millions of Americans, it would have been good for the American economy. Freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt. More homes would have been bought, more businesses would have been started, more couples would have had the confidence to start a family.
If you were that concerned about how this would affect the economy, he would have canceled all of it, which he could have done by executive order. Not this means testing 10,000 for you, 20,000 for you. If you make this amount of money, if you went to this school, nobody has time for all of that. Can you imagine how this would have helped the economy if he canceled all of it? Think about the real estate business. Think about how many people would have been able to put money down, a down payment on a home, on a single family home, which a lot of young people right now cannot afford. Cannot afford. I advise Gen Z students, they can't afford it. They're living in apartments like 4 or 5 deep. Just imagine how that would have actually helped the economy. But he's not going to do that because you have to understand the student loan companies are in bed with the congressmen and women, and they're also in bed with the universities. And so another issue that we need to discuss here is the fact that these universities are not being held accountable for continuing to increase the cost of education. It continues to go up every year. I know you don't want to see what some of these schools are charging. And I'm talking public schools are charging for people to go there just for tuition, never mind room and board. It has become a business. And so what will happen if you don't have a need for the student loan companies, then the universities are affected by business, because then that puts pressure on the universities. You need to give out more scholarships, which, by the way, they don't give out as much as they used to anymore. And not everyone is an athlete. So keep that in mind. Not everyone can get an athletic scholarship.
Millions of people would have felt they could get on with their lives. These Republicans blocked all that. Now, in addition to the hypocrisy, some of these Republican Congress are shamelessly pushing to advance a bill in the coming weeks that gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and handouts to the wealthiest Americans. They still haven't given up on making permanent a $2 trillion tax cut that they never paid for. Never paid for.
We're going to fast forward because, like I said, nobody really needs to know all that. Or we know that already.
Remains to providing for as many borrowers as possible with debt relief. I've directed my team to move as quickly as possible under the law. Just moments ago, Secretary Cardona took the first step to initiate that new approach. We're not going to waste any time on this. We're getting moving on it. It's going to take longer, but we're getting at it right away.
We're not going to waste any time, but it's going to take longer, but we're getting on it right away. That doesn't make any sense. This gentleman next to him, this is Secretary Cardona. Okay. So what he is going to do, for the sake of time, I'm going to speed this up. What he is going to do is he said that he was going to do this through the Higher Education Act, right? And speed this up, which is how he was actually instructed to do it from the very beginning. And if you don't believe that, I talked about this on the Jimmy Dore show. Listen to this. This was a couple months ago.
We have our first guest. We have a special guest. Is Sabby Sabs, friend of the show. She's a Boston-based activist, social critic, educator, and host of the Sabby Sabs podcast, which is part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. Sabrina, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Steph. Hello.
Good to see you. So the reason I want to have you on is because we covered this, but there's more to this story than meets the eye. So, Joe Biden, he was going to cut everybody's student debt by $10,000, right? And it turns out he did it in a way. Well, here's what this guy says. So this guy's name is Jed Sugarman. So he says the Biden administration had a better legal argument if it had relied on the Higher Ed Act of 1965, but instead it made a weak COVID argument, straighting a 9/11 Heroes Act, and could lose 9-0. So Sabby, you were on this. You knew about. I didn't know this. So, but you did know this, that the way Joe Biden was going about relieving the debt, student loan debt, was in a way that made it most likely to be overturned by a court. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think what some people may not be aware of is actually February of last year, Ayanna Pressley, Elizabeth Warren, and Chuck Schumer actually presented this proposal to Joe Biden. And what they asked him to do was to cancel up to $50K. Now, obviously, I thought it should have been all of it, but they asked him to do this through the Higher Education Act of 1965. So for people who are coming to me now saying that, oh, you can't believe that Joe Biden would have done this on purpose. Yeah, I do, because he knew that he was supposed to do it this way. And so the method that he chose, doing it through the HEROES Act, that is actually why we're in the situation that we're in right now. So if people actually would have been paying attention to what was happening last year and the proposal that was made, the original proposal, Joe Biden knew that he was supposed to do it through the Higher Education Act, and he chose not to. So there's that. This video, when was this uploaded? I'm going to put this up here for a second to show you when this conversation took place. 7 months ago, November 15, 2022. So I hate to say I told you so. Now Joe Biden is finally admitting, okay, yeah, we're going to do this through the Higher Education Act. But there are some trickery here that we need to talk about. Victor Shi, he's another liberal tool. You'll see him on MSNBC often. There we have it. President just announced that he will be using the Higher Education Act to move forward with forgiving student loans and other actions for student loan borrowers. This is a president who cares about us. This is real leadership. This is great news. But is it? Shout out to Colin, because Colin was on it. Colin said, as proof that this regulatory process, RE canceling student loan debt, POTUS has implemented is complete and utter bullshit. Congress has granted Secretary Cardona a more specific and unrestricted authority to cancel debt owed under federal student loan. Look at this. This is important. This is addressed to Elizabeth Warren. Look at this. September 14th, 2020. See, Colin found this. A lot of people don't know about this. You have previously proposed that the president of the U.S. could direct the secretary of the U.S. Department of Education to exercise his or her existing authority to cancel federal student loan debt on a broad or categorical basis. We have consulted the statutory and regulatory framework governing federal student loan programs administered by the Department of Education, as well as the framework and controlling interpretations of the budgetary structure of these programs. We conclude that such broad and categorical debt cancellation would be a lawful and permissible exercise under the Secretary's authority under existing law. Let's get to this part. By way of background, the power to create debt is generally understood to include the power to cancel it. This power rests in the first instance with Congress. The Constitution gives to Congress the power to dispose of the property of the United States. U.S. Constitution Article, I think that's Article 4, Section 3. This means that Congress alone is able to release or otherwise dispose of the rights and property of the federal government, and thus subordinate officers of the United States are without that power, save only as it has been conferred upon them by an act of Congress or is to be implied from other powers. And that is referring to Royal Indemnity Company versus the United States. This is the piece everyone needs to pay attention to. Congress gave a general but restricted authority to administrative agencies of the executive branch to cancel debt owed to the federal government in the Federal Claims Collection Act of 1966, as amended by the Debt Collection Improvement Act. The Departments of Justice and the Treasury have promulgated standards by which this authority is to be exercised by the agencies known as the Federal Claims Collection Standards. This giant red box here, peeps. However, as relevant to your proposal, Congress has granted the Secretary a more specific and unrestricted authority to create and to cancel or modify debt owed under federal student loan programs in the Higher Education Act itself. That provision empowers the Secretary to execute the broad debt cancellation plan you have proposed. Just backing up what I said earlier, that he should have done this through the Higher Education Act in the first damn place. Then a federal judge wouldn't have been able to strike it down. It wouldn't have ended up in the Supreme Court. Again, this is coming from, this was addressed to Elizabeth Warren, and this is from Legal Services Center of Harvard Law School. Let's go on. So Colin went on to say, meaning Joe Biden can still cancel student debt for whatever reason today. This regulatory process is not necessary. This regulatory process is merely a stall tactic to scare people to vote for the Democrats next year in light of SCOTUS overturning affirmative action, abortion, student loan debt forgiveness, and whatever they have on the pipeline. We shouldn't be forced to vote for someone or anyone because we are scared of the other party, especially when the party in power doesn't offer anything tangible to the people. Bingo. He can still cancel all of it now. Do you see the problem? But if he were to do that politically for the Democratic Party, that could actually hurt them. This is how they get more people to come out and show up and vote for them again, by holding on to this. If you come out, we're going to put this through and you'll be good to go. If they go ahead and do what they're supposed to do, then they have nothing to run on. And that's what this is really about. Because what else? What are they going to run on? Are they going to run on the economy? No, they're going to run on fear mongering. They're going to say, you just lost affirmative action in higher education. You just receive discriminatory rights for businesses in reference to LGBTQ community. And now you just lost the possibility of having some of that student loan debt canceled. And they're going to point fingers and blame it all on the Republican Party. But these things happen through the Supreme Court. So the real question that people need to ask, and I'll continue to say this over and over again, is this: why is it that 9 people get to decide the fate of Americans in this country? 9 people. Have you met any of the justices? Because I haven't. Do you know any of them? Any of them go to your church, your school? Do you know any of these people? Do they live in your neighborhood? And yet 9 people get to decide the fate of what happens to the rest of us in a lifetime appointment. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never had any job that was a lifetime appointment. Okay? I work in a state that is employment at will, which says they can remove me at any time with no reason. No reason. Joe Biden is lying to you. And just to show you something, how the Democrats are complicit in this, it was actually Nina Turner who tweeted this out. Listen to this. Representative Nancy Pelosi was cited in the student debt ruling. Unacceptable. Right here. As then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi explained, people think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone. He can delay, but he does not have the power. That has to be an act of Congress. Press conference, Office of the Speaker of the House, July 28th, 2021. That is a damn lie. Not only does he have the power to cancel it, he could have canceled all of it by executive order, but they're not going to because they're in bed with these student loan companies. This is, again, another example why you have to get corporate money out of electoral politics. All these politicians, they're bought off. Bought off. So here's Joe Biden once again lying to you. What regulatory process do you need to go through? The letter again tells you, let's come back up. However, as relevant to your proposal, Congress has granted the Secretary a more specific and unrestricted authority to create and cancel or modify debt owed under federal student loan programs in the Higher Education Act itself. That provision empowers the Secretary to execute the broad debt cancellation plan you have proposed. You don't need to go through any regulatory process. This is to stall what is happening and to keep you around until election season in 2024 to convince you to come back out and vote for them again. I'm not playing this game. And they've done this multiple times. This is how they continue to keep you coming back out. Thank you for the super chat. Colin says, I qualify for student loan forgiveness now because I've worked in the public service sector for over a decade. But the process is so complicated and it's not guaranteed you will get it forgiven. Thank you so much for saying that, Colin. This is one of those things like friends of mine found out about when we graduated undergrad and they realized it's not necessarily guaranteed. And again, there's that 10-year rule. Thank you for the super chat, FWC. If we can bail out banks, we can bail out people. Exactly. Buds, not bombs. Those Pell Grants come with Perkins loans. I fell for it. Yeah, oftentimes that's not uncommon for that to happen. Thank you for the super chat, Natalie. Tomorrow is Julian's 52nd birthday. There's banner drops all over. Find one near you and help us support free speech, a free press, and let's free Julian Assange. I'll be dropping mine in Auburn, Washington. All right. Thank you so much for that reminder, Natalie. Yes, tomorrow, guys. So for those of you on Twitter, you'll see there'll be numerous activities happening. And thank you for the super chat, M. Smith. Joe Biden is a used car salesman. Yeah. He's playing people. And then you got people like Victor Shi out here. They got to have their cheerleaders in the media space to convince the American people he's doing the right thing. Shout out to Natalie Williams for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Whoopity whoop. All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algo. Thank you so much. Boy, I tell you, they do it every time. They try to get people every time. And speaking of getting people every time, I'm going to need a little bit of participation from the audience for this next story. Last year, I covered the out of reach, the high cost of housing report. It's released every year. That new report has been released for 2023. And we're going to dive into some of these states to show you what you need to earn as an hourly wage in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in your area. Now, we'll go back and forth between 2023 and 2022. But first, I need some help from you. This is the report. Let me pull it up. Pull up to my bumper, baby. All right. Out of reach, the high cost of housing. And we're just going to make this bigger because. And I'm going to go to the map. And this is where I'm going to need your help, peeps. It's just easier if I go straight to the map than the appendix. Here we go. I'm going to come out just a little bit. Okay. Give me a state. What state would you like for me to show you? Because even though we have the numbers here, there's other things that you need to see that go along with it. So throw out a state in the chat and I will look it up. Yes, it is Grace Jones, Sherry. I didn't think anybody would know that. I didn't think anybody would know, man. Okay. Oh boy, a couple of them already came in. Can't guarantee we'll get to see every one, but I'm going to try. Maryland. All right, let's go to Maryland. Maryland. Why is it? I don't know why. I used to be able to just click on this map like last year. The one last year, I could just click on it. So I don't know why it's not letting me do that this time. Let's go back up. Maryland. In the state of Maryland for 2023, you need to earn $31.08 per hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So I hope everyone can see this well. So it says in Maryland, the FMR, which is fair market rent, for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,616. In order to afford this level of rent and utilities without paying more than 30% of your income on housing, a household must earn $5,387 a month or $64,642 annually. This is assuming a 40-hour work week, 52 weeks per year. That translates into an hourly housing wage of $31.08 an hour. And then if we go down, you can see a little bit more. The minimum wage in Maryland is $13.25 an hour. So obviously the minimum wage doesn't meet that requirement. The average renter wage is $22.71 an hour. That also does not meet the requirement. What you need to make for that 2-bedroom housing is $31.08 an hour. So as you can see, if you fall into one of these categories, the minimum wage or the average renter wage, you don't meet the $31.08 an hour, which you should be making. This is just a reality of the situation, people. We'll go to the most expensive areas here in Maryland. Most expensive areas, the Washington, Arlington, Alexandria, that's that DC area. And Nova, that's Northern Virginia, area there. A lot of people live in DC, work in DC. They live in Maryland or Virginia. Most expensive areas in Maryland, that DC area, California, Lexington Park, Baltimore, Columbia, Towson, Cecil County, and Talbot County. You can see the wages here. The housing wage in that DC area, you need to make $35.35 an hour. The California, Lexington area, you need to make $30.71 an hour. Baltimore, Columbia, Towson, $29.77. Cecil County, $28.27. And Talbot County, $23.10. If you are watching and you live in Maryland, if you make that, type a 1 in the chat if you make that $31.08 an hour at least. Type a 2 if you don't. Curious to see this. Now that's 2023. How was it for 2022? This is the one we did last year. Let's go down here. We're just going to make it bigger. And I'll come up with I'll do the other states as well. I went down too far. Sorry. And if this takes too long to load, we'll just go back to the other one. Okay, there we go. Let's go down here. So we'll go back to Maryland once again. Oh, on this one, I can't click on the state. That sucks. Sorry, guys. Maybe we're not going to be able to do the comparison. 127. Let's see. That's going to take too long. We won't have time for all that. Oh, there we go. It's 189. Yeah, this is why I do not like PDFs. This is exactly why. But here we are. Louisiana, Maine. So we're getting closer to Maryland. Last year in 2022, you needed to make $28.93 an hour if you lived in Maryland. So you see, here we are just a year later, and now you already have to make $31.08 an hour. So you need to make more now. Just 1 year, you need to make more. So that's Maryland. Give me another one. Let's do some more. I think someone mentioned New Jersey. I saw New Jersey here. I thought I did. Most of you guys say you don't make this. Okay. New Jersey. Let's go to that one next. We'll go there. Yeah, Eric, there wasn't a non-PDF version when I looked at it. If you find one, let me know. But when I saw it, it made me download the report. But if you find it, let me know. Let's go back up. Just going to go back up to the index here. And I used to be able to just click on the states too. That's why I hate the PDF version. So let me go down. Okay, yeah, bring that up. If you have that, bring that up, please. That's so much faster. I hate PDF. I'm sorry, you guys. It just slows everything down. Like, I really don't have time for it. I really don't. I'll go to one of the comments here while we wait. Shout out to Regine Jolie for becoming a Sabby member. Give her a big whoop, 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 whoop. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put some of these in the queue. New Jersey. I see Colorado, California, Washington, and I thought I saw some other ones as well. Who else said? I saw Washington. Okay, yeah, that'll be so much easier. Thank you so much, Eric. Okay, all right. New Jersey was next, right? So let's go to New Jersey. So in New Jersey, this is so much better. You need to make $33.50 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. That's 95 hours you need to work. 95 hours a week. That's insane. 95 hours weekly. The hours of work needed at the minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. So if you're making minimum wage in New Jersey, let's see what the minimum wage is. The minimum wage in New Jersey is $14.13 an hour. But to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, you need to make $33.50 an hour. So that being said, if you do make minimum wage in New Jersey, you have to work 95 hours a week. This is insane. This is crazy. This is where we're at now in this country, though. This is where we're at. I don't know if they do the most expensive. We may not have time to do that. But this one here, I want to show you when it says median wages for states' most common occupations. Cashiers, the median hourly wage is $14.52 an hour. So we're looking at $83,960 a year. Fast food and counter workers, $69,710 a year. Interesting. This is interesting. Very interesting. So that's New Jersey. Let's go to, I said Washington State. In Washington State, you need to make $36.33 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. If you make minimum wage, you have to work 92 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom home in Washington State. This is insane. Too much. I said Colorado was next. In Colorado, you have to make $32.13 an hour. By the way, it's ranked 8th in the highest housing wage. You'll have to work 94 hours a week if you make minimum wage in Colorado to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Let's go back to Washington, and I want to see if they'll show me the most expensive area. See, when you download the report, there's so much more that you can see. See, number of households, housing wage. I know that. You guys notice that when we look at occupations, you notice what most of the jobs are, right? Fast food counter workers, cashiers, retail, home health and personal care aides. Let's go down and see if I missed anything else down here. There's a lot of people working jobs where they're making minimum wage. They're cashiers, or they work at a retail store. Or, I mean, I know, like when I lived in North Carolina, when I was in high school, that was actually really common for a lot of women who were middle-aged. They were retail workers. This idea that a lot of people are sitting behind a desk and they have an office, or they're a lawyer, or they're a doctor, that's not the case for most people in this country. And that's what people have to really understand. So that's Washington State. Let's go back. I said, let me see what I put in the chat. Sorry. California. In California, you have to earn $42.25 an hour in 2023 to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. You have to work 109 hours a week in California if you make minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom home. And the state of California is first in the highest housing wage. This is important. You know why? Guess who just went on strike in California? The hotel workers. I told you I did a story about that about a week or two ago. I told you there was a plan where the hotel workers in California, all of them, by the way, all the hotels in California were saying that if they didn't get an increase in their wage, they were going to go on strike the weekend of July 4th. So that is really going to affect tourism in California. Can you imagine? All the hotels are shut down because they have no employees. Think about that. They have to work 109 hours a week in California to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And people wonder why they're on strike. People wonder why. The next one I think I was going to go to was someone said Maine. In Maine, you have to make $24.73 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. If you make minimum wage, you have to work 72 hours a week to get a 2-bedroom home, 24th in highest housing wage. So what you'll notice from this map, the darker blue states are the more expensive housing areas to live in. The lighter blue the state, it's less and less. Now I want to go to a state I went to last year that kind of shocked people. Actually, not a state, but we're going to go to Puerto Rico. Because in Puerto Rico, we all might need to move, okay? In Puerto Rico, you only need to make $10.36 an hour. $10.36 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. If you make minimum wage, you have to work 44 hours a week to get that 2-bedroom home. They are 52nd in highest housing wage. Who wants to move to Puerto Rico? You want to go? Nice weather? $10.36 an hour. Hawaii. They are number 2 in the highest housing wage. You have to make $41.83 an hour in Hawaii to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. For minimum wage, you have to work 139 hours a week to get a 2-bedroom home. This is America, guys. Is this supposed to be the American dream? You see what's happened with capitalism? Someone said me. Natalie, you said me. What state is that? Nikki said, is that Nikki or Vicky? Vicky said Vermont. Let's go to Vermont. Whoops, that's New Hampshire. Hold on. In Vermont, yikes, Jesus. I'm surprised by this one. I'm surprised Vermont's okay. So in Vermont, you have to make $25.54 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. If you're making minimum wage, you have to work 78 hours a week. It's the 20th highest housing wage. I'm actually surprised by that. There aren't as many people in Vermont. So it's like, Bud's Not Bomb said packing. Who wants to go with me to Puerto Rico? Let's go. Let's go. Oz says capitalism kills us all. Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. Wyoming and then Alabama and then Kentucky. Okay, so let's go to Wyoming. Wyoming, you have to make $17.94 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom home. 99 hours a week if you are making minimum wage. So they're 45th. You guys can also move to Wyoming. We said Alabama. In Alabama, you have to make $18.13 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom home. 43rd highest housing wage, work 100 hours a week for minimum wage. I don't really want to move to Alabama. I'm sorry. Kentucky. All right. In Kentucky, you have to make $17.90 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. It is 46th highest housing wage, and you have to work 99 hours a week if you are making minimum wage. I'm just going to check the chat. I see Missouri and I see Illinois and Connecticut. So let's do that. Missouri. In Missouri, you have to make $18.54 an hour for a 2-bedroom home, work 62 hours a week if you're making minimum wage, and that is 41st highest housing wage. Who did I say after Missouri? I already forgot. Shoot. Maybe I shouldn't have done 3. Oh, Connecticut. Connecticut, I know, is expensive. My neighbor to the south. Connecticut, you have to make $31.93 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental. They're 9th in the highest housing wage, and you have to work 85 hours a week if you make minimum wage. That's Connecticut. And then, geez, I just forgot the other one. I feel so bad. I see Tennessee, but I know I said another one. I'm sorry, guys. Tennessee. In Tennessee, you have to make $20.76 an hour to get a 2-bedroom home. They are 32nd in the highest housing wage, and you have to work 115 hours a week if you make minimum wage. Illinois was the other one. Thank you, Jay. Illinois. In Illinois, you have to make $24.59 an hour, and you have to work 76 hours a week if you make minimum wage, and it's the 25th highest housing wage. I think the thing is with Illinois is that once you get outside of Chicago, I imagine the rest of Illinois is probably cheap or cheaper. I don't know what people consider cheap, but cheaper. Texas, I see in the chat. Oh, that's Louisiana. Sorry. Texas. In Texas, you have to make $25.06 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom home, and it is ranked 21st for the highest housing wage. You have to work 138 hours a week if you make minimum wage. Interesting. Bad Cookie said there's nothing outside of Chicago. Okay, well, that explains it. I've only been to Chicago. I haven't been to other cities in Illinois, unfortunately. So, Florida. Let's do that one. In Florida, you have to make, geez, ouch. What happened to Florida? I thought Florida was supposed to be affordable. What the hell? In Florida, you have to make $30.59 an hour. If you make minimum wage, you have to work 111 hours a week. Florida is 11th in the highest housing wage. What happened to my people in the chat that live in Florida? What the hell happened? A lot of people that live up north will move to Florida because it was cheaper to live there, but yikes, how did they become 11th? What's that, Miguel? Florida is no longer as affordable. Yikes. Damn. Something happened to Florida there. Okay. This is ridiculous, though, you guys. Let's check out. I just want to make sure. New York. In New York, you have to make $40.08 an hour. Of course, we all know a lot of that is due to New York City. In order to have a 2-bedroom rental, you have to work 113 hours a week to have a 2-bedroom rental if you make minimum wage, and they are 4th in the highest housing wage. Let's go over to, we'll do my state, Massachusetts. Jesus Christ. In Massachusetts, you have to make $41.64 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom home. I believe that, actually. I believe that. You have to work 111 hours a week if you make minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom home. And Massachusetts is 3rd highest in the housing wage. What does this tell us, ladies and gentlemen? This tells us that, obviously, a lot of us know this, you really can't make a living in this country off of a minimum wage job. You just can't. This is what I talk about when I say a living wage. So we're going to Alaska. I saw that one next. In Alaska, you have to make $26.32 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. You have to work 97 hours a week if you are making minimum wage to afford it. And it's 18th highest housing wage. What does this tell you, though? This is the living wage. Let's just call it that. The living wage in Alaska is $26.32 an hour. That's how we need to frame this. The living wage in Florida is $30.59 an hour. The living wage in Oregon is $29.72 an hour. This is really what people should be making. A lot of people don't make this. A lot of people don't make this. New Hampshire, is that New Hampshire, Rhode Island? Did I click on Rhode Island? Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Why is it doing that? In Rhode Island, the living wage is actually $27.78 an hour. See, these are the things that we don't really get to see. In Georgia, the living wage is $24.75 an hour. Those of you making that $15 an hour and that whole fight for 15, that's nothing. You are not making a living wage. I really do believe this report should be presented to Congress. There's something else I want to show you with this report as well. Metro area. Oh yeah, we did Puerto Rico and Hawaii. It's important that you do those. Give me a zip code. Throw out a zip code, peeps, if you feel comfortable. I'll put one in. I do it right? I think I did this right. Oh, I think I entered that wrong. I definitely entered that wrong. I was trying to do, I forgot the zip code. Okay, I see some zip codes in the chat. 19401. 19401. 19401. You need to make $29.42 an hour. That's Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania. 21231. 21231. You need to make $35.38 an hour. This is Baltimore. I see John Hopkins. That's Baltimore, I believe. 90210. Okay, we'll do that one. I see that one in the chat. 90210. $64.04 an hour. Oh my God. Oh no. Yikes. Okay, let's go, Mike. 89108. 89108. Vegas. 89108. $27.31 an hour. 30319. 30319. 30319. Brookhaven, $44.23 an hour. This country is expensive, guys. Greg did this. Okay, this guy, Greg Burge did his already. He said $46.54 an hour. Jesus. So the point that I want to show, let me put this here. 27893, and then we're going to get to the other one here. Uh-oh, that one doesn't work. 27893 doesn't work. 81507. 81507, you are $26.73. That's somewhere, looks like somewhere in Colorado. Or maybe not. Yeah. I think that's what it says. Jesus. So the point that I want to get to in reference to this report, now that was Maryland. If we go back. Eric, can we put the link to this in the chat so people can play with this at home as well? Out of Reach 2023, the high cost of housing. This year's report shows how high rents resulting from rapid rent growth during the pandemic and the end of many pandemic era benefit programs are combining to exacerbate the financial insecurity of low income renters, leading to the higher eviction filing rates and increased homelessness in some communities. What did I tell you guys? I told you the homeless rates were increasing and the evictions were increasing. Now, I want to go to this part here, because I think everybody needs to see this. There's ways to protect. I'm going to send you guys this link so you can practice this at home, because there's so much on this site. I could have done just like a whole show. The take action. That's what I wanted to show you. The Eviction Crisis Act. So I'm going to put this in the chat for you as well. Add your organization to a letter urging Congress to enact the Bipartisan Eviction Crisis Act. Let me put this in here. You can sign that if you want to. But these are the type of things, you know, we're talking about people testifying in front of Congress. These are the type, we need to be talking about this. People need to be testifying in front of Congress about this. You have to remember the Senate voted down the $15 minimum wage. There's no way you're making a living in this country and you're making $7.25 an hour. There's no way. Where are you living? How many roommates do you have to have? This is not the American dream. This is a dream for companies like BlackRock. This is a dream for companies like Vanguard Group. This is not a dream for the American people. Nobody should have to live this way. The fact that you'd have to work over 100 hours just to make that's not the American dream. And this is the point I want to get, drive home to you guys. I want you to understand what is happening to us. What's happening to this country? The housing needs by state. Like this report, by the way, it's the NLIHC. This report is released July. This report is released July of every year. So last year we did the 2022 one. And we went through the same thing where people gave me states and stuff. They have increased since last year, as I showed you with Maryland. But the Maryland one, like this is ridiculous. I don't know, you guys, but these are the kind of things, again, it's called Out of Reach, the high cost of housing. Check that out when you get a chance. Eric, did you put that in? Oh, you did. Yeah, thank you so much. Out of Reach report. In fact, those of you, like if you support RFK Jr., you support Cornel West, you support Marianne, whatever, you should send them this report and ask them what they plan to do about that. It's a good way to start. Good way to start. Okay, let me go to those comments on Rockfin and then we'll get to the Glenn Greenwald story. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. College admissions for HBCUs increases in past few years. Yeah, all of them. All of the universities are increasing. You're right. And thank you for this as well. Eric, can you put the links to the report I downloaded to my Dropbox and YouTube chat so viewers can compare how much is needed for minimum wage went up? This one is from 2021. Oh, that was 2022 and then 2023. Thanks. And thank you for this. Most expensive for California, Daphne, Fairhope, Folly, MSA, $63.19 an hour. That's insane. Birmingham, Hoover, HMFA, $60.67 an hour. San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, 5656, Tuscaloosa 5158, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara 5129. Sab, New York happened to Florida, just like California happened to Texas. Private equity said, oh, they're moving here now, raise those rent rates. Natives being chased out of cities by New Yorkers and Californians moving, they're making expensive. Yeah, all of the relocating, that's affecting those states apparently. And thank you for this as well. Although for New York State, it says $40.08. For downstate, where I am in New York City, it's $47.13. Out here in Long Island suburbs, $44.17. Run those congressional ballot initiatives, constitutional ballot initiatives to make it unconstitutional for private equity to own housing. That's a big one. Like people cannot continue to thrive this way. Like there's no way this can continue. It's ridiculous. Okay, we're going to get to our final story here. I'm sorry, I'm not going to have time to finish Oregon. I'm going to have to finish it Tuesday. Sorry, guys. But this story here with Glenn Greenwald, so he was interviewed recently on Fox talking about gatekeepers. So we've had a lot of discussion recently about gatekeepers. Ice Cube talked about gatekeepers in politics. And now Glenn Greenwald is talking about gatekeepers in reference to the media. So shout out to Case Study QB here for this clip. Case Study QB says Glenn Greenwald discussing media gatekeepers and liberals who want to suppress RFK Jr.'s reach. Listen to this. It's two clips. So let's start with this one first.
Now joining us is Glenn Greenwald, Pulitzer Prize-winning independent journalist. Glenn, great to see you back on the show. Now, you'd think that if the elites were so confident that they were on the right side of the, let's just say, the vaccine issue, that they'd have no problem debating, confronting, whatever you want to call it, RFK Jr. So what are they so afraid of?
Yeah, I hope you're doing okay after this dangerous man with his dangerous ideas was allowed to be heard on television. I know how threatening that might be. It's really amazing, Laura. This is somebody who is a presidential candidate, whether you like it or not, who's polling at 20%. That means millions of people in the Democratic Party say they intend to vote for him for president. And this inclination on the part of people who teach journalism or who call themselves journalists to say that he ought not to be heard from, he ought not to be challenged, he ought not to be engaged is shocking in one way, but in another way, the liberal establishment in the United States has now explicitly adopted the view that people they disagree with aren't people who are wrong, but people who are so beyond the pale that they can't be heard from. And this is just an expression of that really dangerous mindset.
Now,
let's pause here for a second and let's go back because there's something he pointed out about the journalist. And then we'll get to the second clip as well.
On television, I know how threatening that might be. It's really amazing, Laura. This is somebody who is a presidential candidate, whether you like it or not, who's polling at 20%. That means millions of people in the Democratic Party say they intend to vote for him for president. And this inclination on the part of people who teach journalism or who call themselves journalists to say that he ought not to be heard from, he ought not to be challenged, he ought not to be engaged is shocking in one way, but in another way, the liberal establishment in the United States has now explicitly adopted the view that people they disagree with aren't people who are wrong, but people who are so beyond the pale that they can't be heard from. And this is just an expression of that really dangerous mindset.
The gatekeepers. You have them in different industries. In journalism and in media, they can be the worst. Okay, let me tell you what this looks like. I think that when we talk about media gatekeepers, for example, they will go to such lengths to make sure that certain people are not heard from. So they'll shut them out. They'll blackball them. That's what's happening to RFK Jr. on certain outlets, right? Like they're making sure that we don't want to talk to that guy. Some people are really upset because of the fact that News Nation actually gave him a town hall. And so some people don't like that. But to me, I was just kind of like, then maybe you should have gave him the town hall. It's just, I don't get this. I don't understand these things. It's like, if you don't want to hear what he has to say, then just don't watch it. But to have this idea that he shouldn't even be allowed to speak and to have a town hall, but Joe Biden should, when he can barely talk and he can barely stand at this point in time, what does that tell you about the establishment narrative? So this is important for people to understand. This type of gatekeeping doesn't just happen with presidential candidates. This type of gatekeeping happens with anyone who goes against the established narrative and the narrative that has been approved by the State Department. So that is why there are certain journalists that you will never see on certain outlets. You won't see people like Max Blumenthal on certain outlets, not necessarily because he doesn't want to go there, but because they refuse to have him on. Don't bring that voice on this show. No. We don't want people to hear what he's saying over there. And he's just one of them. But there are many, many more. Wyatt Reed, Fiorella Isabel, right? People don't want to hear from Tara Reid. They go against the State Department talking points. So that's what they'll do. So what they'll do is they'll shut those people out in an effort to silence them. But what has happened is that independent media, in so many ways, they've kind of taken up that mantle and said, okay, if the mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC and also, well, Fox News kind of will bring on anybody. But if they really don't want to hear from you, then I'm going to let you come on to the independent outlet and we're going to let people hear from you. And what has happened is that you have some of these outlets like Rumble that's really taken off, like for some people, like Russell Brand, Kim Iverson, Glenn Greenwald, their shows are huge on Rumble. So you may get blackballed from CNN, but if you go onto Russell Brand's show, you can still get your message out to a lot of people. And that's important for people to know. So this type of gatekeeping, it happens, but I want you to understand it doesn't just happen with politicians. It happens with anyone that goes against that established narrative that the State Department has approved.
Now, Glenn, other than the vaccines, the other reason that he's persona non grata, they want to deplatform him, is that he has some, unconventional things to say about the war in Ukraine.
We have neglected many opportunities to settle this war peacefully. Myself and my family are very, very sympathetic to the Ukrainian people. I think the way that we have conducted the war is bad for the Ukrainian people, is terrible for the Ukrainian people.
Now, the Democrats are really going to want to shut him up now, right, after that comment.
I think that's the main reason, actually. I don't think they care about the vaccine issue. I think they're promoting that because they think that is what will discredit him. I think what they're most worried about are two things. The fact that he is a Democrat, the only one standing up and saying Joe Biden's war policy is wrong and dangerous and is actually not helping the Ukrainian people, but destroying the country of Ukraine for our own benefit or for the benefit of a tiny number of arms dealers.
Oh, and then we're going to go to the second one. Whoops. Sorry. Cuts it short there, but here we go.
People that the health establishment during the COVID pandemic lied and got a huge amount wrong, not about vaccines exclusively, but about things like the origin of the pandemic, about the efficacy of masks, about so many things that they got wrong shutting schools. And that's what they're really worried about. I think the vaccine is just a pretext to use to try and destroy him and then use those other things as the real reason they don't want him heard from.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the other thing too is that it doesn't seem like the rhetoric that's been used against RFK Jr. in reference to the pandemic is actually working the way that they thought it would. Most people don't care. Most people don't care, especially look, let's just keep it real. If you go to the hood and you talk to people and say, hey, you know that RFK Jr. guy, I don't know about him because his views on the pandemic, most people in the hood are going to be like, number one, are going to be like, who? Or number two are going to be like, who gives a fuck? Most people are not going to, I'm sorry, but it's the reality. Most people in the hood, most people in working class communities or poor communities are like, what and who and why? Who cares? Most people don't give a fuck. So who are they they relating that message to? Who are they telling that message to? They're speaking to the professional, managerial class people who are in spaces where these certain liberal outlets are seen as truth tellers. They're speaking to the people who work at the Goldman Sachs, the people who work at Harvard, the people who are lawyers, the people who are doctors, the people who are other politicians, who are judges. Like they're speaking to those people. And some of the college graduates, some of the college students, some of the ones that are in the grad programs, the PhD students, the professors, they're speaking to those people. They're not speaking to working class people. Working class people don't care about this shit. I'm sorry, working class people do not care about this. They're not even talking about this. It's just the reality of the situation.
Glenn, and another pretty interesting thing about RFK is he's not necessarily dogmatic on the issues that deliver a reflexive response from most Democrats. Issues like what's going on at the southern border. Watch this.
I was against Trump's wall. But having seen it down there, I see that you were required to give a physical barrier during certain highly densely populated areas. You need a physical barrier. No nation can survive if they can't protect their borders.
Glenn, I mean, he's finding some nuance, some, wiggle room there for maybe some type of compromise or moving closer to actually we have to enforce our border, that viewpoint. And that's outrageous for the Democrats.
This is the thing I was most struck by, Laura, when I interviewed him, was he's a politician with a very rare attribute, which he has a completely open mind, including about things that he previously believed that he's willing to say were wrong. There were things, for example, he said that he used to believe in Russiagate. Now he realizes he was propagandized by a fraud. There were even things in the middle of the interview that I questioned him about a little bit aggressively, and he said, you know what, maybe you're right about that, and I'm wrong. And the issue about immigration is an incredibly good example because a lot of Democrats do care about the crisis at the border. They pretended to care under Trump, where no one talks about the border anymore. But he's somebody who's really coming forward, I think, a way that will appeal to a lot of people and say, I'm not tied to dogma, as you say. I'm willing to be open-minded and find pragmatic solutions independent of ideology. And I think more than anything,
let's just pause here for a second. I'm going to come back. Let's pause here for a second and talk about the immigration issue. Remember, RFK Jr. is running as a Democrat. And the last thing I think the DNC wants is someone on the debate stage who is a Democrat in a Democrat primary actually urging for to continue some type of a border wall. That's the last thing they want for people to hear. They're going to be like, oh, no, that's what the Republicans are supposed to say. So I don't think they really want that message on the stage at all. And I also don't think they want the message that RFK Jr. has about this war, like stopping the war with Russia and Ukraine, getting out of these wars just in general. They don't want people to hear that, because if you hear someone say that and they're running through the Democratic Party, then that kind of makes you question the party a little bit. And you start looking at it in a way like, hey, actually, didn't you guys used to have that position? Didn't the Democratic Party used to feel that same way? They don't want that message to get out. Now, when you talk about media and these journalists gatekeeping people, one of the things I do want to add is that it does also happen in independent media as well. There's also people in independent media that won't bring some of these people on, that won't bring RFK Jr. on because they don't want people to hear this message, right? Or if they do bring them on, it's only to scold them and to try to destroy them so that their viewers won't even think about entertaining, supporting him as a candidate. There's a lot of gatekeeping that happens like all around. If you pay attention, you can probably figure it out. There's a reason why there's certain people you never see on this show. And it's not because I don't invite them. It's because they don't want to be associated with what I have to say. The same vice versa. There's a reason why you don't see me on other shows, because they don't want to be associated with what I have to say. So I think that, again, if you are strong in your message and you believe what you're saying and you're able to argue your message to a convincing point, then you shouldn't be afraid of hearing what someone else is saying, whether it's on your platform or another platform. And that's just how I look at it. If you're strong and confident about what you believe and what you're saying, then you shouldn't be afraid to engage and have that discussion. And I really do believe, in reference to this situation with RFK Jr., I don't think a lot of these networks, these outlets, are strong and confident within their position.
I think a way that will appeal to a lot of people and say, I'm not tied to dogma, as you say, I'm willing to be open-minded and find pragmatic solutions independent of ideology. And I think more than anything, that's what a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, common sense, just plain old common sense. Glenn, it's great to see you tonight. Thanks.
So that's a good point that people need to hear. It's like, if you
Now joining us is
echo those same like talking points of the establishment Democrat, right? Then you're kind of seen as they don't want to engage with you. They don't really want to hear. They want other people to hear what you have to say. It's almost like you do have to go along in order to get along, right? And we had those voices before. We had those voices from people who I now call regressives who are in Congress, that they had different points of view, but you notice how they were subdued once they became a part of that party. Natalie says, I've never made even $20 an hour. No wonder I couldn't afford to move out. Yeah, it's very telling. It's very telling. Yes, Roger. Thank you for the super chat. You're doing a show Tuesday, July 4th, Sap. Yes, because July 4th is on a Tuesday. I'm actually going to fireworks on Monday. I'm not going on a Tuesday. The big fireworks that a lot of people go to here is in Boston, and it's a nightmare, like it's a nightmare trying to get back from there on the 4th. So what some people will do is they'll go to other areas for fireworks, typically the day before, where it's not as crowded. Plus, I've done the Boston fireworks thing like multiple times. But yeah, I'll be here Tuesday, July 4th. I'll be celebrating the day before. So you shall see me. Thank you for the super chat. Buds, not bombs. You'll live in a van, eat bugs, but you'll be happy. You'll be living in a van down by the river. Thank you for the super chat, a kid. Sabby Cornell West needs to get out there to push his message on mainstream media. He's doing it on independent media, but needs more eyes and ears on him. He's been on mainstream media a couple times already. He was on Fox. He was on CNN. I think he was also on MSNBC, and I think he was on Fox as well. So he actually, mainstream media covered him from the jump. So he's been on there. I'll take the comment on Rockfin. Eric, thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Run CBI's amending state constitutions, a minimum law that says minimum wage that permanently sets the minimum wage 20% above housing. Offer tax subsidies to small and medium-sized businesses to offer subsidies to cover 85% to 100% of labor cost. Very interesting. Thank you so much for that. All right, guys, before I head out, I just want to remind you one more time here. We are doing a mutual aid event here in Boston. Now, this is a part of the RBN chapters. So I'm a Boston person. So I'm the Boston chapter here. And the first event that we're doing in Boston, thank you, Robin, so much for making this. You're a gem, is the Boston Community Mutual Aid Barbecue. That is actually going to be Saturday, July 29th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. It's going to be First Church, 6 Elliott Street. That's in JP. Those of you who are from here, you know what I'm talking about. You know where that's at. And then I'm actually going to put, once I get these printed, actually, we're going to actually translate these. We're going to get these translated into Spanish and Portuguese as well. And then once that's done, I'll send it back to Robin. And then we're going to put a little QR code down here in the right-hand corner for people to be able to RSVP. So that should be fun. I'm looking forward to that. But if you want to help, we do have a GoFundMe. So we have been taking donations there. Let's see how we're doing. Thank you. So far, we've raised $763. The goal is $2,000. And like I said, I may not even need $2,000 for this barbecue because I was really fortunate that they gave me a break price-wise on the location. It will be indoors. It's been raining off and on here, so I don't want to chance it with outdoors, just keeping it real. But yeah, the whole team of people working together with me here. We have great help. So they're helping me with this. And then we're also going to be teaching classes, virtual classes for people here in Boston. I've gone over a list of all those. I'll put it up again another time as well. But I'm really excited and really pumped. And it is past my time. I got to go. Thank you so much for the super chat, Marcos. I find it crazy that Walmart pays minimum wage. Then we the taxpayer, pay for the government assistant employees are sometimes forced to apply for. That's a good point. But if you guys want to help with the mutual aid, I usually send it out for my newsletter as well. So I'll just put the link there. If you want to help donate, that'll help us out a lot. All right, guys, I actually got a skadoodle. So I hope you learned something here today. I will be here Tuesday night since I'm celebrating the 4th on Monday. Have a good night, guys. Keep up the fight.